To grow your e-commerce brand, you're going to have to spend a ton of money on marketing. And if you need opinions on how to spend that money, you're going to find plenty of them. There's no shortage of people on the internet with the best marketing strategy to skyrocket your revenue. But a lot of those opinions also come with a bias. Agency owners are biased to tell you that the channel they focus on is the best one for all brands and that they do that service better than anyone else. Meanwhile, founders and in-house marketers and CMOs have survivor bias. They praise the virtues of the channels that have worked well for their brands. And I won't even talk about the course sellers. But if you're looking for some advice on how to best spend your money, maybe I can give you a second opinion. I'm a CFO that works with e-commerce brands, so I get to see behind the curtains of some pretty successful brands. And that means that I get to see the strategies of theirs that work as well as the ones that don't. At the same time, I used to run a brand, and even today I like to do media buying on the side because it helps me give better advice to the brands that I work with. So in this video, I'm going to be ranking some of the main marketing strategies that most e-commerce brands employ and what my perspective on them is as a CFO. First up, we've got the OG of digital marketing, search engine optimization. SEO is all about ranking as high as possible as you can on a search engine like Google so that you can get organic traffic from people searching for keywords related to your product. So first off, what's the good about SEO? Well, to start, once you acquire a high ranking position on the search engine results page, or SERP, it's basically free traffic and conversions from that time on. It does require some amount of ongoing cost to fend off the competition, but it's usually fairly low for maintenance, depending of course on how aggressive your competitors are. The nice thing is that it does have a little bit of a snowball effect, so once you're at the top, it's hard to get dethroned. SEO doesn't just apply to platforms like Google though, it also applies to a platform like Amazon, which is a search engine for buying products. And on Amazon in particular, the value can be even higher, because if you appear at the top of the SERP on Amazon, that means you're probably going to get the most eyeballs, so the most traffic, so the most conversions, and the more purchases you get, the more reviews you have, and the more reviews you have, the more traffic you're going to get. Think about it, if there's two listings at the top of a search page on Amazon, one of them has 10,000 reviews and the other 200, the one with 10,000 reviews is going to get more purchases, which means it's going to get even more reviews. So that product with only 200 reviews is going to have a very difficult time dethroning the one with the 10,000. So if you can get essentially free traffic and fend off the competition forever, what's the bad? Well, firstly, it's very slow to get an ROI on SEO efforts. There's very little increase in revenue or value that comes from SEO when you move from position 50 to 15. But once you get into the top 10 and then really the top 3, that's when you actually start to reap the rewards. And depending on the competition, getting to the top of page 1 can be quite difficult and usually is. That means there's going to be a very long time that you're spending money on content, on technical SEO and backlinks with almost no reward. And then as soon as you get to the top few positions, it's going to hockey stick. And that's not great from a cash flow perspective, because as a growing e-commerce brand, you need revenue to be coming in. You can't just make these massive investments into SEO hoping that eventually it'll pay off. Most e-commerce brands don't have funding, so if you put $1 into marketing, you want to get a couple of dollars out at least pretty quickly. On top of that, it can be kind of hard to know if you're even making any progress in the early days because changes in rank come very randomly and sporadically. One day you'll be ranking number 43, the next day you'll be 22, the next day you'll be back to 51. And so because of that, it's not really cheap or easy to test SEO. You either have to invest in it and wait until you get the results or just not touch it at all. Furthermore, even if you do crack SEO and manage to get to the top, your total scale and revenue is limited by the amount of available search volume. So it might take quite a bit of time before that return on investment pans out. Meanwhile, if there's an algorithm change, you can lose all of your gains overnight. So overall, if we're talking about SEO on a platform like Google, I don't love it. It's usually going to be a very significant cash outflow early on, and it'll take quite a long time before you realize that ROI, if at all. On top of that, measuring ROI is not even that easy because Google Search Console doesn't give you good data as to which search terms people are converting on. So I'd recommend put a little bit of an investment maybe into the technical SEO because that usually correlates with a good user experience as well, and maybe a little bit into the content as long as there's some value outside of the SEO itself. But I wouldn't waste any money on backlinks unless you're very confident that your competition is very weak and the search volume opportunity is very high. However, Amazon SEO is a totally different story. It's very easy to invest in Amazon SEO because the work that you do for that usually overlaps very heavily with your Amazon ad strategies and conversion rate optimization. And your organic rank on Amazon feeds from the success of your ad strategies. So it's basically an additional way to capitalize on getting more traffic and more revenue beyond just the ad strategies working well themselves. So overall, I'm going to give search engine optimization 2 money bags on 5. Next up, we've got SEO's more profitable cousin, Google Ads. So what are some of the goods of Google Ads? Well, because you're targeting high intent traffic, you can usually get an ROI almost immediately. On top of that, you can usually get started with a pretty small budget. While it might not be crazy efficient, you could theoretically start with $10 a day and get an actual ROI from that. Agency cost for a service like Google Ads tends to be lower than some of the other marketing channels, and also it doesn't come with the additional cost of having to maintain things like creative. If you start off with search or shopping campaigns, you don't need any additional photography or ads made. It tends to be fairly consistent in terms of volume because it's based on people searching. There is seasonality to consider, but that tends to be fairly predictable. It's also fairly reliable for profitability control if you use smart bidding using target CPA or target ROAS. Also, it's mostly click-based conversion tracking, so it's fairly high confidence to know that it's actually driving an ROI. And it's also reasonably easy to identify which of your investment in the channel is bringing in new traffic, usually the people who are searching non-branded keywords, versus the spend that's going towards retargeting customers, which is more likely the branded keyword campaigns. So, sounds like a lot of great stuff. So what's the bad? Well, firstly, most of those good things apply to search and shopping, but it's not quite as great when you start talking about YouTube or display or performance max. Those campaign types tend to require more creative, their targeting's not as good, their attribution's not quite as reliable, and they're not as forthcoming and generous with data as search and shopping. It can also be frustrating how much of your spend has to go to branded keywords, where it feels like Google's just cannibalizing organic clicks, so you're just paying a tax for no reason. Profitability can also get squeezed here quite easily because of the fact that you and your competitors are all vying for this very small pool of clicks that are high value. And it also doesn't scale very well because it's capped by search volume. That all being said, I still think it's a great channel. The campaigns can be set up to be very profitable, it has low volatility, it doesn't require a big cash investment to get rolling, and the ROI is pretty quick. The lack of volatility, in addition to data that they provide around search volumes, can be very helpful for forecasting as well. Though it does struggle to get a lot of scale, it's still a very reliable workhorse. So because of that, I'm going to give Google Ads 4 money bags on 5. Next up, we've got organic social content. So the best thing about organic social is that it doesn't incur any ad spend costs. Once you've acquired a big following, it can be a good way to keep your audience engaged and stay in touch with them. And on a platform like TikTok in particular, if you get lucky with an early video, you can get a lot of eyeballs really quickly. So for brands with limited resources and who can make their content themselves, this could be an interesting channel. On the other hand though, it's a fairly demanding channel. It's very slow to build a following, and yet you'll still have to invest a ton into content to be able to do so. Each piece of content costs you the same to create it, whether it's seen by 5 people or 500,000. So in those early days, you're going to be putting effort into content that absolutely nobody's going to see. Though to be fair, it's a lot easier to get that sudden burst in views with a small following on TikTok than it is on something like Instagram. And to be honest, most brands don't get that much of an ROI out of social. The cost of creating content can get quite high, so you can keep that lower by either doing the content yourself in-house or just repurposing content that you had for another purpose. But what's annoying is that you have to be somewhat consistent with whatever that investment is to be able to get value out of the channel. You can't just post once every few weeks or whenever you have a sale, because your engagement's gonna get a lot lower. And on top of all that, it's extremely difficult to know what sort of actual return on investment you're getting from the channel because attribution is not great. Most brands don't get much actual ROI from organic social, but they just do it to keep up appearances. So overall, it's one of my least favorite marketing channels. It has a high cost, a low ROI, takes a lot of effort to build and to maintain, and you barely know if you're getting any value out of it. Honestly, for most brands, it's just a cost of doing business, not a viable marketing strategy to grow. So I'm gonna give organic social media 1 money bag on 5. But organic social media also has a much cooler cousin, and that's influencer marketing. While influencer marketing can get very expensive if you're working with superstars or celebrities, if you have a good outreach strategy, you can get quite far with just the cost of inventory. With a strong influencer seeding strategy, you can get a lot of people to post about your product without paying them just because you shipped them a product that they liked. And when done well, this can provide a ton of scale for your brand. Unlike organic social media, if you hit the right partnerships with influencer marketing, you can scale your brand really fast. And if you get lucky with one good relationship, the brand can pop off. On top of that, the investment in this channel can then generate content which you can use on other channels. So it's one of the channels that can give you a really outsized return on your investment. So what are some of the bad things then? Well, for one, it's not exactly a science. A lot of the relationships are going to fall flat, so you might take some time before you see an ROI. You usually get the best results if you play the volume game. That means you're going to have to invest a fair bit of time before you actually see that benefit. If you go for a more sure thing with a big shot influencer, it's going to be a lot more expensive, and honestly, even that can fall flat. It's also very difficult to predict an ROI. Because it's a little bit more of a volume game, kind of like gambling, it's difficult to know if any particular influencer is going to pay out. On top of that, pricing out influencers is also a real challenge. You'll talk to someone with 100,000 followers that's going to charge you $1,000, and a person with 3,000 followers that's going to charge you $4,000. There's also a lot of additional hidden costs in this channel beyond just the money that you pay the influencers and the inventory that you send. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into finding influencers, negotiating with them, and then maintaining the relationship. You're also going to have to send out tons of inventory as well as incur shipping costs, and that's kind of a pain in the ass from an accounting perspective because it's hard to separate those orders from the real ones. So overall, it's a very unpredictable channel with a lot of moving parts. It can take a while before you start to see a return, and even then it's hard to know what the return actually is. The attribution for influencer marketing is not great. You can use affiliate links or discount codes, but it's still not going to be very precise. However, if you can get this channel to work, it can work really really well. It can be a much more economical way to scale than some of the other channels. On top of that, it has the benefit of giving you a lot of content that you can use on other channels, and it's one of the best channels for building your brand's reputation because you're borrowing the credibility from other people who have audiences that trust them, who are then praising your brand. But probably one of my favorite things about it is that it doesn't quite have the same sort of diminishing returns that you get on other channels. On a channel like Google Ads or Meta Ads, the more you spend, the more expensive it becomes, the harder it is to become profitable. But if you can do influencer marketing right and get those early wins, then it's almost as if the more you spend, the more ROI you get. Because any individual person, if they see one person talking about your brand and then see 10 others, they're going to be a lot more likely to buy. So because of all that, I'm going to give influencer marketing 4 money bags on 5. Next up, we've got one of the GOATs, Meta Ads, or what I still call Facebook ads. While it might not be a perfect fit for every product, Facebook ads probably has one of the best potentials to scale your business. While the first few dollars you spend on the platform might not do that well, it can be reasonably quick to achieve an ROI. And if you have strong creative, you can scale quite far while staying quite profitable. Almost every 7- and 8-figure brand I've worked with has gotten the vast majority of their revenue thanks to Facebook ads. Unfortunately though, it is not without its challenges. Firstly, it does require a fair bit of an investment to get rolling. On the one hand, if you have a fresh pixel installed on a brand new store, it's going to take some time and data before the algorithm even figures out what you're selling and to who. And you're also going to have to develop and test a lot of creative before you actually find something that's going to work and have any traction. So in those early days, you're going to have to invest a fair bit before you start to see any results, and it also has a reasonably high minimum budget to maintain the algorithm. Like at an absolute minimum, unless you're only running retargeting campaigns, you should expect to spend at least $100 or $200 a day. It's also kind of an addiction in that all that revenue you're acquiring requires a constant inflow of ad spend to maintain, and if your ad account ever gets banned, your revenue can fall off a cliff. On top of all the ad spend, there's quite a bit of maintenance cost that goes into all the creative you have to keep on feeding into the account. And tracking the cost of all that creative can be rather challenging. If you're getting it from a content creation agency, then alright, but you're probably also getting it from influencers, from content creators, and even from employees. Also, the performance can be very volatile, which means that your contribution margin can fluctuate up and down quite a bit. You can either spend the minimum amount every day, but your revenue is going to go up and down, which is going to be a pain in your profits. And while cost caps can make the ads more profitable, you're still not going to get a predictable amount of volume every day. And measuring the ROI has also gotten a lot more difficult in recent years. View-through conversions can take a lot of credit for revenue they probably didn't deserve. Even beyond that, there's a significant amount of attribution loss in general, which makes it harder to calculate the ROI. And exclusions aren't quite as good as they used to be, so a lot of your spend can go to just remarketing to existing customers. So overall, it's a very expensive channel to get started on, it's a very difficult one to scale, and it's not always easy to identify what the ROI is. That being said, it is probably the most reliable channel in terms of its overall potential to scale your business. On top of that, your investment in Facebook ads, even though it's hard to track, has a very significant halo effect on all the other channels. As you scale your Facebook ads, you're going to see more in-store purchases, more purchases on Amazon, and more searches on Google. So despite its numerous flaws, it is probably one of the most powerful channels available to you, and it's taken multiple brands to 8 and 9 figures. So because of that, I'm going to give Facebook ads or Meta ads 5 money bags on 5. Next up, we've got the end of the customer journey, retention marketing. Here we're going to be talking mostly about email and SMS marketing. So the best thing about it is that it is almost free to do. Once your list is large enough, it can be a massive source of recurring revenue from customers that you've already acquired. Building that list can also be done very passively, as it happens for almost no cost as you're acquiring customers anyway. And it costs almost nothing to throw a pop-up on your website just to gather additional emails. And a lot of the work can be done by automations, which increase the revenue per each customer you acquire for minimal additional cost once the automations are set up. So far, it sounds like free money. What are the cons? Firstly, the software tends to be very expensive, though it does scale with list size, so it can be fairly consistent from an ROI perspective. Also, somewhat similar to organic social media, the cost to design and send a campaign is the same whether you're sending it to 10 people or 10,000. Though to be fair, it is easier to opt for much more basic looking campaigns in the early days. Attribution also tends to be kind of annoying because platforms like Klaviyo are going to have a default setting of 5-day click and 1-day views, so they tend to take a lot of credit for revenue that they probably don't deserve. They also try to take a lot of credit from platforms like Facebook ads because a user will go to the website and then see that little pop-up and then enter their email so they can get their 10% discount code, and then Klaviyo will think, oh wow, I did all that. As a marketer, I'm not the biggest fan because it's not the sexiest channel, it doesn't allow you to scale, and its performance is capped by your acquisition channels. But as a CFO, I love it because it's a minimal cost to build and maintain a list and a minimal cost to send to them. Sure, it can grow your brand and the attribution's kind of tricky and the software is sort of expensive, but it's like picking up money off the floor. You can't not do it. So because of that, I'm going to painfully give retention marketing 4 money bags on 5. So there you have have it, a CFO's point of view on the marketing strategies available to an e-commerce brand. While I do have my favorites based on having worked with a lot of different brands and seeing what has worked, at the end of the day, every brand is somewhat unique. Some brands are going to crush it with SEO but aren't a fit for influencer marketing, and other ones are going to scale to the moon off influencer marketing alone. Ultimately, as a CFO, the most important things to me beyond just getting an ROI is how confident we can be that we're getting the ROI that we think, how easy is it to predict that ROI in terms of forecasting, and how much of a cash investment is there upfront before I actually start to see those benefits. But that all being said, I hope this video gave you a little bit of additional perspective on the marketing strategies available to your brand. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them below. Otherwise, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.